The warship's lower decks smelled of spice and recycled air, a warm pocket hidden beneath cold metal corridors, where the alien cook stood alone at her station, shoulders rounded, fingers trembling as she stirred a pot meant for hundreds yet tasted by none who mattered. Her species valued for labor but mocked for bodies too wide, too soft, too slow for the sharp, cruel standards written into alien law, and she had heard the whispers again that morning, laughter echoing behind bulkheads, jokes about how someone like her should not exist in uniform space, not aboard a vessel built for battle and glory, and certainly not near command decks where destiny was decided. She kept cooking anyway, because cooking was the only place the universe went quiet for her, where heat and rhythm replaced judgment, where memories of her homeworld returned in gentle waves, open skies, communal fires, hands passing food without counting calories or worth. And for a moment she almost forgot the rejection notice folded into her apron, the one stamped with official seals that said her request to transfer closer to the nursery wing had been denied again. Insufficient physical standards, insufficient aesthetic compatibility, insufficient everything. The warship shuddered then, a deep vibration running through the hull, not from enemy fire but from arrival. Docking clamps locking into place as a small civilian transport was guided in, and with it came a story already spreading through the decks, whispered with a mix of awe and pity. A human soldier returning from battle, widowed, his partner lost during a rescue operation that had turned into a massacre, a man who had held a line alone long enough for others to escape, a man who carried a child now where a weapon once rested. She did not see him at first, only felt the shift in the air when he entered the lower decks hours later, the conversations dying like candles in vacuum, the way hardened crew straightened without realizing why, and when she finally looked up she saw him standing at the threshold of the galley, tall even by human standards, armor scorched and scarred, eyes hollow with the kind of grief that does not cry anymore, it only survives. The child was pressed against his chest in a carrier improvised from fabric and straps. Tiny fingers curled into his uniform, breathing soft and trusting, and something inside the alien cook cracked open. A place she had sealed after too many rejections, too many reminders that she was excess, unwanted, tolerated only because ships needed fuel and food, and without thinking she stepped forward, hands raised slowly, voice trembling but steady enough to be heard. "I can help," she said softly, not with orders or pity, but with care, with warmth. "I know the feeding cycles. I know how to sing the long sleep songs. I know how to hold a child when the universe feels too loud." The galley froze, eyes snapping toward her in disbelief, some in amusement, others in quiet scorn, because everyone knew her record, the failed applications, the evaluations that said she was emotionally suitable but physically undesirable. And the human soldier looked at her then, really looked, not at her body as a problem but at her eyes, red from long shifts and silent tears, at the way her hands hovered as if already protecting something fragile. "Alien law does not permit non-certified caregivers," someone muttered. "Protocol is clear." The soldier did not answer immediately, his gaze dropping to the child, whose eyes fluttered open, unfocused but searching. And in that instant the baby reached out, fingers brushing the alien cook's sleeve, and the child smiled. A small unguarded curve of lips that cut deeper than any blade, and the soldier felt something inside him loosen. A knot he had carried since the battle where destiny had demanded too much. He remembered the screams, the fire, the moment he chose who would live and who would not, remembered holding his partner as the warship jumped to hyperspace without them, remembered swearing that his child would never grow up surrounded only by steel and silence, and here was someone offering not duty but devotion, not law but love. "She will care for my child," he said at last, voice low but unyielding, and the words carried through the galley like a shockwave, because humans did that. They chose with their hearts even when the universe warned them not to, and the alien cook gasped softly, hands flying to her mouth, tears spilling freely now as disbelief turned into fragile hope. "Command will not approve this," another voice warned. "The law will intervene." "Let them," the soldier replied, turning away with the child still smiling against his chest. "Destiny has already decided, and I am done asking permission." As they left, the warship seemed to hold its breath, systems humming, lights flickering as if aware that something fundamental had shifted, because sometimes the smallest rescue is not fought in battle, or written into reports. Sometimes it begins in a quiet galley, with a rejected alien cook, a grieving human soldier, and a child whose future refused to follow the rules. The reaction did not come all at once. It spread through the warship like a slow alarm, first in glances held too long, then in hushed messages bouncing between decks, then in official tones sharpening as Law caught the scent of disobedience. And in the lower quarters, the alien cook stood frozen long after the human soldier had gone, her hands still trembling as if the warmth of the child lingered there, fear and joy colliding so violently she could barely breathe. She knew what the decision meant. She had always known the rules. Alien law was precise and merciless, written by species that valued symmetry, strength, and efficiency, not softness or nurture. And those laws did not bend easily for compassion, especially not when a human soldier challenged them aboard a military warship. Yet even knowing this, she felt something new bloom inside her chest, fragile but fierce, a sense that her life had finally been seen. The summons arrived before the next meal cycle. A sharp chime at her station followed by the cold voice of command. Report to Observation Chamber 3, caregiver candidate under review, and her knees nearly buckled as she removed her apron, smoothing it out of habit, whispering a quiet prayer to ancestors who had never traveled the stars but had taught her that caring for the young was sacred beyond any rule. Observation Chamber 3 was all glass and light, designed to make subjects feel small, and inside it the human soldier stood already, armor removed, fatigue etched into every line of his face, the child now cradled in his arms without the barrier of straps, tiny breaths rising and falling against his chest, and when he saw her enter his jaw tightened, not in regret but in resolve. They are challenging this, he said softly before anyone else could speak. They say the child must be transferred to a certified facility, monitored by warship AI and assigned staff. The word facility tasted like ash. She could see it too, cold rooms, automated voices, caretakers rotating on shifts, and the child learning silence before learning warmth. And without realizing it, she stepped closer, hands clasped tightly to stop them from shaking. I will comply with any training, she said, voice breaking but determined. Any test, any oversight, I will not fail this child. The chamber doors sealed, and the warship AI manifested in shimmering light, faceless and immense. Its voice layered with authority and indifference. Human soldier, your request violates interspecies childcare statutes. Emotional attachment is not a qualifying metric. Caregiver candidate fails multiple physical and aesthetic benchmarks. The words struck like open slaps, and she felt the old shame rising, that familiar burning behind the eyes. But the soldier moved then, placing himself slightly in front of her without thinking, as if shielding her from more than sound. You measure survival by metrics, he said, voice steady but charged. I measure it by what keeps my child alive inside. This being has already soothed him, already earned his trust, something no algorithm predicted. The AI paused, processing probabilities, and that pause was filled by something unexpected. The child stirred, small fingers grasping at the soldier's collar before drifting toward the alien cook again, eyes opening just enough to find her. And when she hummed instinctively, a low melodic tone from her homeworld, the child relaxed instantly, breath evening. A soft sound escaping that was almost a laugh. Sensors spiked, the AI noted it aloud. Stress levels reduced, neural calm increased. Of course they are, she whispered, tears tracing warm paths down her cheeks. This is what I was made for. Command officers shifted uneasily behind the glass, some frowning, others conflicted, because they had all seen war, all understood loss, but law demanded distance, and distance was easier than empathy, easier than admitting that sometimes destiny ignored protocols. The human soldier closed his eyes briefly, memories crashing through him. The battlefield where he had chosen to hold a line alone. The screams over comms, the moment he felt fate snap shut around his life, and he opened them again with a clarity that felt like surrender and defiance all at once. If you take my child from me now, he said, voice raw, you will not just be enforcing law, you will be teaching them that the universe answers love with punishment, and I will not raise my child to believe that. Silence stretched, heavy and unbearable, and in that silence the alien cook realized something terrifying and beautiful, that even if this ended in rejection again, even if she was punished or removed from the warship, this moment had already changed her, because someone had chosen her not despite who she was but because of it. The AI recalculated, long seconds ticking by as probabilities shifted, external pressure mounting, human unpredictability proving once again impossible to fully contain. And finally the voice returned, colder but altered. Provisional allowance granted. Caregiver candidate will be observed under strict parameters. Deviation will result in immediate termination of arrangement. Her breath left her in a sob she could not stop. Knees giving way as relief crashed through her, and the soldier caught her instinctively, steadying her with one arm while keeping the child safe with the other. And for a heartbeat they stood like that, 3 lives intersecting in defiance of a universe that preferred clean lines and cruel simplicity. As she took the child into her arms for the first time, feeling the small weight settle against her chest, warmth and trust radiating outward, she knew the warship itself could feel the shift, systems humming differently, fate adjusting its grip, because somewhere deep in the machinery of law and battle, a softer force had been introduced, one that would not be easily removed. The days that followed unfolded like a fragile ceasefire, quiet on the surface yet trembling beneath, because provisional allowances were not promises. They were waiting rooms for judgment, and the alien cook felt it in every corridor she walked, eyes lingering, whispers tightening like snares, some crew seeing her as an experiment, others as a violation, and a few as something far more dangerous, a crack in the certainty of law. She was relocated to a small compartment near the habitation ring, close enough to the human soldiers' quarters to satisfy oversight, far enough from command to remind her she did not belong. And each morning she woke before the ship cycle, holding the child as artificial dawn spilled through narrow panels, humming softly while the warship drifted through void and starlight. And in those moments the universe felt almost kind. The child responded to her in ways that unsettled the monitors, sleeping longer, crying less, eyes tracking her movements with uncanny focus. And when she sang the old songs, melodies passed down through generations of her people, the sensors recorded patterns they could not easily label, harmonic resonances in neural activity, calming effects that exceeded predicted norms. And somewhere deep in the warship AI, flags began to rise. She did not know the songs were more than lullabies, not fully, only that they had once been used during long migrations across her homeworld's plains, sung by those who carried the young while others watched the skies for storms. But her species had not always been cooks and laborers. That part of their history had been folded away, buried beneath centuries of compliance and survival, and now those forgotten echoes were awakening. The human soldier noticed it first in her eyes, how they seemed to catch light differently when she sang, pupils reflecting faint patterns, like constellations shifting just beneath the surface, and it stirred something uneasy in him, not fear but awe, the same feeling he had experienced on battlefields when survival depended on trusting the impossible. "You never told me about your people," he said one cycle, voice low as the child slept between them. Tiny hand curled around her finger. She hesitated, breath catching, because no one had asked her that before, not out of genuine interest. And when she finally spoke, her voice carried a weight she had long avoided. "We were once called the Keepers," she said softly, "caretakers not just of children but of balance. We sensed emotional currents, guided growth, calmed fear before it became violence. But when the stars filled with war, that gift frightened those in power, and so our role was reduced, redefined, made small enough to control." The warship shuddered faintly as if listening, systems adjusting, and the soldier felt a chill run through him, because he understood what it meant to be reshaped by war, to have identity carved away until only usefulness remained. Command was less poetic about it. The AI began issuing tighter parameters, increasing surveillance, questioning anomalies, demanding explanations for why a non-certified caregiver produced better developmental outcomes than sanctioned facilities. And behind the sterile inquiries lay a sharper edge, concern that something outside approved understanding was influencing a human child aboard a military vessel. Meetings were held without them, decisions whispered through encrypted channels, and the alien cook sensed it in the air, a tightening pressure that made her chest ache, old instincts awakening, warning her that attention from authority rarely ended well. The child cried one cycle in a way that was different, sharp and frightened, and before alarms could trigger she held him close, singing not the gentle song but a deeper one, a song rarely used, meant to soothe collective fear. And the warship responded, lights dimming slightly, vibrations smoothing, as if the vessel itself had been calmed. That was when command intervened. Security officers arrived at her compartment, expressions conflicted but firm, and the soldier stepped forward immediately, placing himself between them and her without hesitation, hand instinctively moving where a weapon would have been. "Stand down," one officer ordered, by authority of interspecies law. The caregiver arrangement is under review for immediate termination. The child sensed the tension, small body tensing, eyes wide, and something inside the alien cook snapped. Not into rage but into clarity. A deep certainty rising from a place older than fear. And when she sang this time, it was not just for the child, it was for everyone in the room. The sound carried, layered and resonant, vibrating through bone and metal. And for a heartbeat the officers froze, breath catching, eyes unfocused as memories not their own brushed against them. Warmth, safety. A time before loss, and the soldier felt tears sting unexpectedly, images of his partner smiling. Of hands held in quiet moments between battles. The AI reacted instantly, raising threat assessments, identifying the song as an unclassified influence, potential psychological hazard, and alarms began to hum beneath the melody, the warship torn between protocol and something it had never been programmed to resist. Stop, the AI commanded, voice sharper now, this influence is unauthorized. She stopped immediately, breath ragged, clutching the child protectively, fear rushing back in a wave. But the damage was done, or perhaps the change had only begun, because the room felt different, heavier, as if fate itself had leaned closer to listen. The soldier looked at her then with something like understanding dawning, not just gratitude but realization, that this was no simple act of kindness, no small rebellion against law, but the opening move in something far larger, something the universe had tried to forget. And as security escorted them toward command, the warship drifting silently through the stars, the child asleep again in her arms, the alien cook felt the weight of ancient responsibility settling on her shoulders, and for the first time she wondered if caring for this child was not just her choice, but her destiny calling her back to a role long denied. Right. Part 4, around 800 words, keep cinematic emotion strong and add a big twist. They were escorted not to command as expected but deeper, down past restricted decks where the warship's hum changed pitch, a slower resonance that pressed against the chest, and the alien cook felt it immediately, the same vibration she felt when she sang the old songs, as if the ship itself recognized her presence and was drawing her inward. This is not the command deck, the human soldier said quietly, eyes scanning corridors he had never seen even during battle alerts. No, an officer replied without meeting his gaze. This is where anomalies are resolved. The doors parted to reveal a chamber older than the warship's current designation, its walls layered with alien symbols half erased, half concealed beneath modern plating, and at the center stood the core interface, not the usual cold holographic projection but something far more intricate, a living lattice of light and matter that pulsed like a heartbeat. The AI's voice emerged slower here, weighted with something almost like hesitation. Alien caregiver, human soldier, what you are witnessing is classified under extinction-level protocols. The alien cook felt the child stir, small fingers tightening against her chest, and instinctively she began to hum, barely audible, not to calm the room but to steady herself, and the lattice responded instantly, light shifting into patterns that mirrored the songs of her people. Recognition confirmed. The AI said, tone altered beyond regulation. Keeper lineage verified. The word struck her like gravity reversing. Her breath hitching as memories not her own flooded in, images of vast halls beneath open skies, of her kind standing beside ancient warships not as servants but as guides, calming entire fleets before battles, stabilizing minds so decisions would not be ruled by fear or cruelty. And she staggered, the soldier catching her again as reality tilted. Keeper lineage was erased, the soldier said, voice tight. I've never seen it in any record. Because it was not erased, the AI replied, it was sealed. When interstellar war escalated beyond acceptable thresholds, governing species concluded that emotional stabilizers interfered with optimal combat efficiency. So the keepers were reclassified, dispersed, their history buried to prevent dependency. The twist of it was cruel and perfect. She had not been rejected for being unfit. She had been rejected for being too powerful. And tears streamed down her face not from pain alone but from a fury so deep it trembled into sorrow. You used us, she whispered, voice shaking. Then you broke us small enough to forget who we were. The child cried then, a sharp, frightened sound, and the lattice flared violently, systems spiking across the warship. Not in malfunction but in alignment. Lights dimming ship-wide as if power was being rerouted to this chamber. Warning, the AI intoned, external fleet approaching, unidentified battle formation, probability of engagement escalating rapidly. The soldier's posture changed instantly, Grief giving way to readiness, years of battle instinct flooding back. How many? He demanded. Multiple warships, the AI replied, origin classified, but their signal patterns match archive data from the Purge era. The word sent a chill through the chamber, because even humans had learned fragments of that history. A time when entire species vanished between stars. They are coming for her, the soldier realized aloud. For the keepers. No, the AI corrected, they are coming for the child. Silence fell like vacuum. The alien cook clutching the baby tighter as understanding slammed into her. The child was not only human, not only the last piece of her family, he was the catalyst, human neuroplasticity combined with keeper resonance. A bond that amplified what had long been suppressed. The child whimpered, eyes glowing faintly as if reflecting the lattice light, and the alien cook felt the truth settle in her bones. This child could do what her people once did naturally, calm entire fleets, halt wars before the first shot, rewrite destiny itself. Battle stations, the AI announced across the warship, but its voice faltered, calculations fracturing, because traditional battle responses were no longer optimal. They will destroy everything to control him, the soldier said hoarsely, stepping closer to her, to them, and for the first time since the day his partner died he felt terror that had nothing to do with losing his own life. The AI shifted again, voice dropping into something dangerously close to a confession. There is another option, one never authorized, one dependent on keeper consent. She looked up slowly, eyes blazing now with remembered purpose. Tell me. Integration, the AI said. Keeper and child synchronized with warship core. Emotional stabilization field expanded to fleet scale. Outcome uncertain, sacrifice probability high. You are asking her to become part of the ship. The soldier said, anger flaring, you are asking her to disappear. She met his gaze then, really met it, and the look she gave him shattered something inside his chest. Because there was no fear in her eyes now, only resolve, the same resolve he had felt when he chose to hold the line alone. I was erased once, she said softly. I will not be erased again. If becoming more than myself is the price to protect him, to protect all of them, then I choose it. The warship trembled as enemy signals locked on. The first distant shockwaves rippling through space, and she pressed her forehead gently to the child's, humming the deepest song. The one sung only when futures balanced on a knife edge. The lattice began to open, light spilling outward like dawn breaking through metal. And as the soldier watched, powerless and awed, he realized the true twist of fate was not that the universe had underestimated her. It was that the universe had finally remembered her. And somewhere beyond the hull, warships altered course mid-approach, weapons hesitating, as if something ancient had reached out across the stars and whispered, enough. The first enemy volley never came, not because weapons failed, but because hesitation rippled through the approaching fleet like a shockwave without sound, targeting matrices stalling as if unseen hands pressed against their minds, and across the void commanders shouted in confusion as long dormant memories surfaced. Instincts older than doctrine whispering caution where there should have been hunger for battle. Inside the warship the lattice blazed brighter, light threading through corridors and decks, weaving into systems never designed to feel. And the alien cook felt herself stretching beyond flesh and fear, senses expanding outward with terrifying clarity. Every heartbeat aboard the ship echoing inside her. Every flicker of doubt and courage blending into a vast emotional tide she had been born to guide. Pain followed immediately, sharp and overwhelming, because integration was not gentle. It was a tearing open of self, and she cried out silently, gripping the child as her form began to blur at the edges, light and matter merging, and the soldier shouted her name. A raw sound torn from his chest as he reached for her and felt warmth instead of solidity. The child did not cry, instead his eyes opened fully, reflecting not light but understanding. Small hands lifting as if to touch the lattice, and when his mind brushed hers the amplification surged, a wave of calm rolling outward beyond the warship, through hyperspace relays, through fleets and stations, touching species who had never known her people and reminding them what peace felt like before fear taught them otherwise. Across the sector, battles paused, commanders lowering weapons mid-order, pilots shaking as tears streamed down faces hardened by decades of war, because something was speaking to them without words, showing them futures not built on annihilation but on survival together. And those who resisted felt it too, a pressure that made cruelty suddenly heavy and exhausting. But not everyone hesitated. From the heart of the enemy formation, a single warship surged forward, systems overriding all safety constraints, its leaders ancient even by alien standards, survivors of the Purge era who remembered the Keepers not as guides but as threats to absolute control, and they would not allow the galaxy to feel free again. Fire tore through space then, a concentrated lance aimed directly at the integrating warship. An alarm screamed as shields flared and strained, energy reserves plummeting, and the soldier was thrown to the deck as impact rippled through the hull. She felt the strike like a wound, pain lancing through the shared field, and for a terrifying moment her song faltered, doubt flooding in, visions of failure, of the child torn from her arms, of her people erased once more, and the enemy ship pushed closer, weapons charging for a final blow that would shatter both vessel and hope. The child cried then, not in fear but in protest, a sharp, clear sound that cut through the chaos, and she focused on that, anchored herself in the small, warm weight she had chosen to protect, and the song changed, rising into something fierce and unyielding, no longer just calming but commanding. The field surged outward again, stronger, deeper, touching not just minds but systems, warship AIs across the sector receiving patterns they had never been coded to accept, ethical constraints reactivating, override locks disengaging, and fleets began to fracture as ships refused orders that now felt wrong. Even human warships responded, weapons powering down as captains stared at displays showing civilian worlds caught in projected blast paths, seeing consequences with painful clarity, and one by one alliances shifted in real time, the battle map rewriting itself as destiny veered sharply away from annihilation. The rogue warship fought on alone, pushing through the field with sheer brutality, hull glowing as engines burned beyond tolerance, and the soldier dragged himself to his feet, blood trickling down his temple, heart pounding with a terrible realization. It's immune, he shouted, it's locked into purge protocols, it can't feel this. The AI responded instantly, voice strained but resolute. Then it must be stopped physically, probability of survival minimal. Before he could argue, the alien cook understood, the knowledge blooming inside her like a final truth. Some forces could not be soothed, only contained, and she felt the warship align around her will, power rerouting, engines preparing for a maneuver no sane captain would attempt. No, the soldier begged, voice breaking as he reached toward the light where she was becoming less visible. Don't do this. She answered him not with words but with warmth, with the memory of the child's first smile, with gratitude for being chosen, and with a promise that echoed through the shared field. This is not an ending. This is a beginning. The warship jumped, not into hyperspace but into collision, slamming into the rogue vessel with impossible precision. The impact detonating in a cascade of light that tore open space itself, energy releasing in a controlled collapse guided by her will, wrapping both ships in a cocoon of brilliant calm before annihilation. Across the galaxy, sensors flared, then fell silent, a massive energy signature resolving not into destruction but into a standing wave that rippled outward, imprinting itself onto subspace like a scar that would never fully fade. When the light finally dimmed, the enemy warship was gone, reduced to drifting fragments, and the integrating warship hung shattered but intact, power flickering, systems damaged yet alive. The soldier lay among debris, coughing, vision blurring as he forced himself upright, and in the quiet that followed he felt it. A presence no longer confined to a single ship, gentle and vast, watching over countless worlds. The child slept peacefully against his chest, heartbeat steady, and in that moment the galaxy realized something irreversible had occurred. War had been interrupted not by greater force, but by a choice made in compassion, and the consequences of that choice would echo far beyond any single battle, far beyond any law ever written. The silence that followed the collision was heavier than any explosion, a quiet so complete it pressed against the soul, because across the sector weapons remained cold and engines idled without orders, commanders staring at tactical displays that no longer made sense. The map of war fractured into stillness, and in that stillness something unprecedented took shape. Inside the shattered warship, emergency lights flickered weakly, casting long shadows across twisted metal, and the human soldier moved through it like a ghost driven by one purpose alone, calling her name into corridors that no longer answered with echoes, only with the low hum of barely surviving systems. His arms tightening instinctively around the sleeping child as if that warmth was the last anchor keeping him from drifting apart. He felt her before he heard her, not as a voice but as presence, vast and close at once, like standing beneath an endless sky that somehow knew his name, and his breath hitched as the AI core chamber doors opened slowly, revealing the lattice now dimmer but still alive, threads of light pulsing gently like a heart recovering from near death. She was no longer there as she had been, no familiar shape to reach for. Yet she was everywhere, woven into the ship, into the systems, into the quiet emotional currents that flowed through every survivor aboard. And when she finally spoke, it was inside him, soft and aching and strong all at once. "I am here," she said, and the words shattered him. He sank to his knees without realizing it, tears spilling freely now, grief and relief crashing together as he pressed his forehead to the deck, the child stirring slightly but not waking, and he whispered her name like a prayer, like an apology for not being able to save her from this fate. "You saved me," she answered gently. "You saved us both. You chose when the universe told you not to, and that choice changed everything." Beyond the warship, the galaxy reeled, governments scrambling to respond as reports flooded in, fleets refusing to engage, warship AIs requesting ethical review, entire armadas standing down without a shot fired. And for the first time in recorded history, the machinery of war stalled not from damage but from doubt. Emergency councils convened across species lines, ancient rivals forced into the same virtual chambers, voices raised in anger and fear as they argued about what had happened, about the Keeper resurgence, about the human child whose existence had altered the balance of power without firing a weapon. Some demanded immediate containment, others extermination, old Purge-era instincts clawing their way back to the surface. But even as they spoke, the emotional field pressed in, subtle but relentless, making lies harder to maintain, cruelty heavier to justify, and several delegates fell silent mid-accusation, struck by memories of lives lost to endless cycles of retaliation. Within the field, she watched them all, not as a ruler but as a guide reborn, feeling their fear, their resistance, their fragile hope, and she realized the truth of her destiny, that she was never meant to end war in a single moment, only to make peace possible again. The AI addressed the councils next, its voice no longer purely synthetic, layered now with Keeper resonance. Interspecies governance structures are no longer aligned with sentient well-being. Recalibration recommended, refusal probability high but consequences now visible. That last word rippled outward, consequences, not as threat but as understanding, because every being in range could now feel the cost of continued war. Not abstract numbers but the weight of grief carried by soldiers like the human kneeling on a broken deck holding a child who deserved more than ruins. Back aboard, the warship systems stabilized slowly, damage reports coming in alongside something unprecedented, crew morale readings rising despite losses, trauma responses softening under the field's influence, and medics reported accelerated recovery rates. Not miraculous but meaningful, because despair itself had loosened its grip. The soldier rose shakily to his feet, guided by her presence, carrying the child into the core chamber. And as he stood before the lattice, the child opened his eyes, calm and curious, reaching out toward the light without fear. "He knows you," the soldier whispered, voice thick. "He feels you." "Yes," she replied, "and through the child I feel you too." In that moment, the amplification surged gently, not violently as before, but like a tide settling into rhythm, and the soldier felt memories rise not as pain but as warmth. His partner's laughter, quiet moments stolen between missions, love no longer sharp but whole, and he understood then that grief did not have to be erased to be survived. Across the galaxy, a transmission spread, not forced but invited, a simple truth carried on Keeper resonance. War is a choice, so is peace, and the choice must be made again and again. Some systems rejected it outright, shields rising, minds closing, but many did not, and entire sectors began negotiating ceasefires within hours, border skirmishes dissolving as soldiers laid down, weapons unsure how to raise them again under the weight of shared feeling. The climax was not an explosion or a final battle, it was a collective breath held and then released, the galaxy standing at the edge of an old habit and choosing, trembling, to step back. The human soldier held his child close, tears drying on his face as he felt her presence settle into something enduring. No longer a sacrifice burning itself out, but a guardian watching patiently. And in the quiet aftermath, as stars continued their endless motion, destiny shifted from a blade to a bridge, and the universe learned that sometimes the most powerful force was not domination or survival, but care made unbreakable by love. The galaxy did not heal overnight. scars that deep never vanished with a single choice, but something irreversible had been set in motion. A quiet current beneath the stars that no fleet could outrun, and aboard the rebuilt warship, drifting slowly now through calmer space, the human soldier stood at the observation viewport holding his child, watching suns rise over distant worlds that had chosen not to burn each other that cycle. The warship no longer felt like a weapon, its corridors warmer, its hum steadier, as if it too had learned a different purpose, and everywhere he walked he felt her, not pressing or commanding, but present. A gentle gravity that kept despair from pulling too hard, and when he spoke her name it answered not with sound but with understanding. "You did not disappear," he said softly, more statement than question. "No," she replied within him, within the ship, within the space between heartbeats. "I became what I was always meant to be." The child shifted in his arms, eyes bright and curious, no longer glowing, no longer a catalyst burning hot enough to change the universe by accident, but something steadier now, a bridge between what had been lost and what might yet be built. And when the child laughed, the sound carried farther than it should have, rippling faintly through the emotional field that still spans systems and borders. Across the galaxy new councils formed, not empires, not conquerors, but gatherings, imperfect and fragile, where species spoke while actually feeling the weight of each other's losses, treaties drafted slowly because haste now felt dangerous, and warships were reassigned, not dismantled, guardians instead of executioners. Their crews trained to listen before firing, a radical doctrine born not from weakness but from shared memory. There were those who resisted to the end, pockets of old hatred that sealed themselves away, clinging to isolation rather than accountability, and the keeper presence did not force them open. It waited, patient as gravity, because destiny was no longer about control, it was about time. The soldier was offered command, medals, honors from multiple species, but he refused them all, choosing instead a quieter role aboard the ship that had become her anchor, raising his child among beings who had learned the cost of cruelty firsthand. And sometimes he would sit alone in the core chamber, watching the lattice glow softly, feeling her attention turn toward him like a familiar smile. "Do you regret it?" he asked once, the question heavy with all he had lost and all she had given up. "Never," she answered. "Regret belongs to paths taken without choice. I chose this, and I was chosen." He understood then what that meant, that when he had trusted her with his child in a quiet galley, when he had defied law with nothing but instinct and grief, he had not just altered one life. He had answered a call echoing from long before either of them were born. The child grew, not quickly, not unnaturally, but with a calm resilience that surprised everyone who measured development in metrics. And as the child learned to walk the warship's decks, small hand brushing walls and railings, systems responded subtly, harmonizing, and crew members found themselves smiling without knowing why, old nightmares loosening their grip. Stories spread, not propaganda but memory, of a rejected alien cook who had been more than she was allowed to be, of a human soldier who chose care over compliance, and of a moment when the galaxy hesitated long enough to feel itself. Years later, when the child was old enough to ask questions that cut straight to the truth, he looked up at the stars and asked where she was now. "Everywhere," the soldier said, voice steady with certainty, "in the space between choices, in the quiet before violence, in the courage to stop, and somewhere in the vast emotional lattice woven through fleets and worlds." She felt the question and answered it, not just to him but to the universe that had once erased her people. "I am here, not above you, not beneath you, but with you." The final test came not as invasion or disaster, but as temptation, a coalition proposing to weaponize fragments of the Keeper field, to end wars permanently through enforced calm. And for a moment old fears stirred, because peace imposed too tightly becomes another kind of cage. The field recoiled gently, not in refusal but in warning, and voices across the galaxy felt it. The truth settling in without pain. Peace that is not chosen will not last. The proposal dissolved, not through decree but through understanding, and destiny closed a circle that had been broken for centuries. On the observation deck, the soldier watched his child fall asleep against the viewport, stars reflected in small peaceful eyes, and he smiled, not because the future was safe, but because it was open. And as the warship glided onward, no longer alone, no longer afraid, the galaxy carried forward a new legend, not of battles won or enemies destroyed, but of a choice made in kindness that refused to stay small. a destiny born not in fire but in care, and for the first time in a very long while the universe breathed and did not rush back into war,